So coming up this weekend is going to be UFC Fight Night taking place in France, and this is a card that I'm really looking forward to. It's actually a very long card at 14 fights long, taking place in France, in front of a crowd. A long card in front of a crowd, they're my favorite types of card, and I'm really looking forward to it. Now, I do know that I'm pretty late on this one. In fact, I actually haven't recorded a UFC prediction video, I want to say in about 2 weeks now, but it has just been because I have been very busy. Contender Series does take up a lot of my time. I know there is only 5 fights per week with the Contender Series, but I try and stay a week ahead every single week. And then on top of that, I have just been quite busy with university recently. I think I had 3 assignments due last week, and then last week I also had an exam. So there's just been a lot going on outside of YouTube at the moment, but I should be able to pick it back up where I was about a month ago now. With this card, I think it's good. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not really looking forward to waking up at 4 a.m. on Sunday, but I think that the card is going to be worth it. Of course, I am still writing my articles for WeWantPicks.com. $10 per month premium membership where you get access to everything that I do on the website, which is early Contender Series articles as well as non-UFC related event articles like the PFL, Bellator, and other promotions as well as Angelo and Jacob's bets and predictions and lots of other tools as well for UFC cards. Now I've got 14 fights to get through. Let's get through them now. The first fight on the Tapology bout order is Bolaji Oki fighting against Chris Duncan. Oki's an interesting fighter for me, and the reason really is because I wasn't that high on him going into the Contender Series, even though he has been a very hyped up prospect by a lot of other people that follow prospects in the regional scene of MMA. I wasn't as high on him as others, and that is because I did have questions about quite a few of his kind of skill sets, like his takedown defense and especially his cardio, because I was watching his fight here against Naim Khan, and he really did start to slow down towards the end of the fight. But then when he took on Dylan Salvador and he knocked out and beat up a former Glory kickboxer on the feet, I was high. I was like, man, this guy's good. And then he fought against Timmy Kwamba, and in that fight, he was low volume, very tentative, really relied on fighting behind the jab the whole time. And in that one there, you could tell that he had a massive size advantage. And Timmy Kwamba found a lot of success in that fight. It was a split decision. I do think that Oki did do enough damage to win the fight, but Kawamba, you cannot take away from his performance, was able to find his own success and get the takedowns on him. So now I'm a little bit lower on Oki as I was coming into the UFC. He takes on Chris Duncan, and Chris Duncan really has been quite up and down. Yes, he fought on the Contender Series and got knocked out by Vyacheslav Buchev, but that was because he had to cut weight, I think, 3 times in 2 weeks. But then he come back, he won on the Contender Series again against Charlie Campbell in a comeback win where he was knocked down a couple of times. And then he's had a couple of decent performances in the UFC. He beat Oumar Morales, but it didn't look that great. And then he beat Yanal Ashmouz, and once again, Yanal Ashmouz broke his arm, and Chris Duncan couldn't finish him in that fight. And then, of course, he's looking good against Manuel Torres, finding success on the feet, of all things, against Manuel Torres, and then just kind of makes a couple of mistakes in the offensive grappling that he was trying to pull off and gives up his back and gets the submission. That is actually how I think he would beat Bolaji Oki in this matchup. I think that Bolaji Oki has kind of shown a little bit of how you can beat him, and that is actually to pressure him, to wrestle him like Timmy Kwamba was able to do. And Chris Duncan has shown that he is willing to wrestle in some of his fights. But I do think that Bolaji Oki can still win this matchup on the feet. I don't love Chris Duncan's chin. I do think that this guy does get hit way too much. I have seen him hurt multiple times as well so far. And Bolaji Oki is absolutely massive for lightweight. He looked huge against Timmy Kwamba, who is a featherweight, I know, but he looks huge against Dylan Salvador, who's a lightweight. And he is a very powerful striker. Now, the takedown defense does concern me a little bit, but I do think that against Chris Duncan, I think that he should be able to find the success and find the knockout. Minus 220, a little bit wide, I think, but I think that Bolaji Oki hopefully can learn a lot of things out of that Timmy Kwamba fight and can pick up that volume and get a little bit more aggressive in this matchup. And now we have Nora Cornolle fighting against Jacqueline Cavalcanti. I originally picked Nora Cornolle here. I know that this is a actually rematch between these two from a very long time ago, in which Jacqueline Cavalcanti did win, but it was in Cornolle's debut, and I don't think there's necessarily a lot you can take from it. But, of course, since then, Cornolle has won multiple fights in a row, and so has Jacqueline Cavalcanti. I originally picked Cornolle, but as the time has gone on, I've lost confidence in it. I just think that Jacqueline Cavalcanti is a little bit better. I think that she is more technical. I like her striking. I think that she does look pretty good. Even though there is a lot of weaknesses in her game still, I think that she does still back up a little bit too much. I think she does get pressured a little bit too much. And Nora Cornolle, that's kind of what she does. Is she is a pretty aggressive striker. She isn't the most technical. I don't think she's going to be as good at striking as Cavalcanti, but she is aggressive. She is going to be moving forward. And for that reason, I didn't mind picking her, but I'm still going to go with Cavalcanti. My lowest confidence pick on the card. I recommend staying away from this one completely. I'm going to go with Cavalcanti, and with that, I'm going to quickly move on to the next one. Daniel Barez fighting against Victor Altamirano. My first underdog of the card, and I think I have a few underdogs on this card. I like Daniel Barez, man. I think that Daniel Barez is a little bit underrated. Now, there is quite a few red flags that I am going to need to bring up that I have noticed that a lot of other people haven't quite brought up about Daniel Barez, and maybe it's just because the story wasn't as big as I thought it was. Daniel Barez has taken a lot of time off. He made his debut against Jafel Filho. From memory, I don't think it was a short notice opportunity. I think he genuinely was signed straight up for it. But in that fight, he was looking pretty good. I know he got submitted in the first rounds, but if you do watch the fight, although Barez is a wrestler, he's finding a lot of success on the feet. He does hurt Filho on the feet, but then Filho does make a little bit of a comeback, really kind of takes advantage of mistakes that Barez was making on the ground, and gets the submission. After that, Daniel Barez, and pretty soon after that actually, he had his face like broken. It was a very scary injury. I think that it happened in a motorcycle accident, but don't quote me on how it happened. I do just know that it did happen. So he has had to step away from the sport for about 1 year and 3 months now. Obviously having to recover from that, being in the hospital, and now getting back into fight shape. So yes, there could be some concerns there, of course. But I do think that he can beat someone like Victor Altamirano. Victor Altamirano, very tricky guy in general, has a pretty awkward striking style, I think. Fights behind the jab a lot, but he kind of does still fight in like a very free-flowing state, if that makes sense. He doesn't have the best takedown defense, and I look at a guy with Daniel Barez, with the wrestling that he does have, and I think that that's something that he can kind of look to exploit in the game of Altamirano. Victor Altamirano got dominated by Tim Elliott on the ground. Tim Elliott just absolutely took him down, controlled him. Altamirano couldn't do anything about it. And then Felipe dos Santos, in that matchup, actually was getting taken down by Victor Altamirano, and I am on the minority. I did think that Dos Santos won the fight just based on pure damage, but some people seem to disagree, but that really is just kind of how the judging scorecards sort of do work, as it is damage trumps all. It's very hard to interpret, I guess. But yeah, I did think that Dos Santos did win that fight. I thought he did more damage. In this one, though, I think that Daniel Barez can find success both on the feet and on the ground, but I think he's going to need to look to wrestle if he is going to be able to take the win as the underdog in this fight. So I'm going to go with Barez. I think he can get the takedowns. He's a pretty big guy for the weight class too, even though he is 5'6". I think he can get it done and get the takedowns. Over the next few fights, there's just a lot of massive favorites, and I will be picking all of the favorites. I do like Ailin Perez to defeat Darya Zheleznyakova. Darya Zheleznyakova is a pretty good striker. I think that she has showcased so far, more so in her regional career, that she is a very solid striker. I know that she didn't really look amazing against Montserrat Rendon, but in that fight, Montserrat Rendon did get 3 takedowns, but I believe Zheleznyakova outlanded her like 3-1 in significant strikes. The numbers were kind of crazy. But in that fight, Darya had to defend 6 takedowns, and she was taken down 3 times in that one, so 50% takedown defense. In the past, though, she did get taken down by Melissa Mullins, lost, I believe, 4 minutes 59 in round number 1 to ground and pound TKO. Bad stoppage, I thought, but Melissa Mullins got the takedown, and from there, Darya Zheleznyakova did kind of look like she didn't really know what she was doing on the ground. So although I think she is going to have much better striking in the fight, she's taking on a nightmare matchup. I think that this is a really good matchup for Ailin Perez. Ailin Perez kind of is just the Merab Dvalishvili of women's 135. She's going to go out there, she's going to shoot for takedowns very regularly. I think she's averaging like 6 or 7 takedowns every 15 minutes. It's kind of getting to the point where it's getting a bit ridiculous. So she's going to go out there, she's going to attempt a lot of takedowns, and I just don't think that Darya Zheleznyakova takedown defense is going to be good enough to be able to defend all of the attempts that Perez is going to be doing against her. So I'm going to pick Perez here. I think she does get the takedowns. I think she wins using her takedowns, and I think she actually might find a finish at some point in the fight. So I'm going to pick Perez to win by submission. I think that she does have a very big grappling advantage. And now we have Taylor Lapilus fighting against Vince Morales, and Vince Morales has accepted this fight on short notice, and I like the re-signing because it proves that you can do it. You know, if you get released from the UFC, it's not the end of the world. You know, Vince Morales went out there, he fought 5 times, went 5-0 in a year and 4 months, and he's back. And I think that it's very good that he is back because he took on some good guys, man. You know, he defeated the legend and former UFC fighter Teruto Ishihara, the Ultimate Fighter legend. I should know, the original Road to UFC legend, I believe it was. Yes, the original Road to UFC Japan legend Teruto Ishihara, and then he also defeated former UFC fighter, much more recent, former UFC fighter Hunter Azure in the 3rd round by Peruvian necktie, which did go somewhat viral on Twitter. And of course, throughout that, he did defeat some pretty good guys on the regional scene. Vince Morales, I believe in the UFC, started out as a wrestler, but then started to fall in love with his hands a little bit, and that is where he did lose. But he didn't lose to bad guys. You know, he lost to Miles Johns and someone else that I believe is pretty high up in the rankings as well, and then was released. So yeah, Vince Morales, though, he's pretty solid. He does take on Taylor Lapilus. Taylor Lapilus is a very technical striker. He can be quite low volume, but he does pick his shots quite well, and he does have very good takedown defense as well. I do think in this matchup, Taylor Lapilus is just going to be the better striker. I don't really see Taylor Lapilus as being the most dangerous guy in the world, but I think it kind of is going to be a matchup where Lapilus can showcase his skill set and kind of show that he can control someone like Vince Morales on the feet. So I think that Lapilus is going to dictate the fight with the feet, with the standing, and then win the fight by decision in that way. And now Ludovic Klein fights against Roosevelt Roberts. This is another short notice matchup where Roosevelt Roberts has accepted the fight. And it's just another fight for Ludovic Klein. I think that he can get a finish in. Ludovic Klein's interesting. He's been fighting some really good guys, and then he's been fighting a lot of short notice replacements. He did most recently defeat Thiago Moises. I think that's a very impressive win because Moises is no joke as a grappler. And I have said it before, Ludovic Klein is not a big guy for 155 pounds. I know he's very, very fast, very, very technical. He still isn't that big, and there's nothing you can really do about it. 5'7" at 155 pounds, you know, taking a guy that's 6'2", he's going to be outsized in that one there. And then, of course, prior to that, he did defeat AJ Cunningham. That was a matchup for sure. And then he beat Ignacio Bahamondes, who we just saw got a massive win at this fair. Roosevelt Roberts was on the Ultimate Fighter, trained under Michael Chandler on that team, then got a short notice call against Mateusz Rebecki, lost that fight in the 1st round. Honestly, this is a better matchup for Roberts because he's taking on a guy that's going to strike, and Roberts can present dangers on the feet and on the ground, but I do think that Ludovic Klein is just going to be a little bit too fast on the feet, a little bit too good. We just saw Klein defeat a much better grappler, in my opinion, in Thiago Moises, and I think that we are going to see Klein go out there, find the finish, get the knockout, and I think from there we need to see Klein take a bit of more of a step up in competition. Now, Oumar fights against Da Un Jung, and it's really sad to see Da Un Jung on a 3-fight losing streak. Now, I still consider Da Un Jung to be a very solid fighter. He's very good boxing, very dangerous elbows in the pocket, and at one point he was 1-2. And then he went, I believe, 15 fights unbeaten, and then ended up 15-2-1. And now he's lost 3 in a row. And it's kind of sad to see, but I guess it kind of all fell apart with the draw against Sam Alvey. But yeah. Anyway, Da Un Jung, he's a striker, for sure. He's definitely not a grappler. He's a boxer for the most part. He stands pretty tall, does have very good shots in the pocket, but he can get caught. Like Dustin Jacoby caught him pretty badly. Devin Clark was able to beat him with pressure and clinch control, and I think that's something that Oumar can be able to look to implement in this matchup here. Oumar is a former KSW fighter. He had a lot of success there. He went 3-0 in KSW, and of course built up a lot of hype for himself there as well. Come over to the UFC, did take on a short notice replacement matchup, but now he is getting the big step up in competition. What I like about Oumar is that he recognizes that he can have a big advantage in the grappling against some of these opponents. You know, even against Tuko Tokos, I think he actually only landed one significant strike in that fight. He just kind of spent most of the time getting the takedown against Tuko and then finishing the fight with submission. I think Oumar can do the same thing against Da Un Jung. Da Un Jung is a boxer. I think that even then Oumar has showcased very good striking on the feet, but the path of least resistance for this prospect is going to be in the grappling, and I like Sai to go out there against Da Un Jung and get the submission by just attempting the takedowns. That's another thing about Oumar I should say, is that he has showcased that he's quite good in the position on back mount, and especially against the cage. Beat Tuko by rear naked choke, beat Alcantara by, well, back mount TKO, and then also choked out Luis Henrique da Silva as well in his last 3 fights. Now we can move up to Ion Cutelaba fighting against Ivan Erslan. I do love the fact that we are seeing someone get signed to the UFC that didn't have to go through the Contender Series. And I do also love the fact that we are seeing the UFC sign guys from these bigger promotions, like KSW, for example. Ivan Erslan did fight for the KSW title twice. He did lose most recently to Ibrahim Chuzigayev, but his first attempt at the title was against Thomas Narkun in 2020. So he had a pretty long career fighting for them in the KSW. A couple of pretty decent wins recently. Bogdan Guniko was a fighter that I was actually quite high on at some point. You know, he was 9-0 with all 9 wins in the first round, and then he did run into Ibrahim Chuzigayev, who is very good. And if he's a free agent right now, the UFC should really kind of get interested in him. I think he's quite good. And he, you know, went 9-0, 10-0 actually, sorry. And then he lost to Chuzigayev, and then Erslan beat him at his own game by knocking him out in the first round. This is a fight I struggle with a lot, because I think that Erslan is still a little bit too one-dimensional. Because Erslan, if you watch him, he is a very, very big light heavyweight, and he's a striker. And I don't think he's much more than a striker. I haven't really seen the best takedown defense out of him. I haven't seen the best takedown grappling defense out of him either. And although Ion Cutelaba is not a guy you can trust to fight with a good game plan at all, if Ion Cutelaba's team is telling him you need to win this fight or you're going to get released from the promotion, surely he's going to wrestle, right? And I do this all of the time. I pick fighters based on the fact that they should be able to wrestle in this matchup, and then they go out there and they don't wrestle and they get knocked out. We've seen that happen to Ion Cutelaba how many times now? Like 3 times he's been KO'd, both times by Ankalaev. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of worry here with Cutelaba. He is a guy that goes out there and is crazy in the first round, but I'm gonna go with Cutelaba just because I think that Erslan is just a little bit too one-dimensional. But I do think that if Erslan can get past Ion Cutelaba, I think there's some bangers, man, for him in the UFC's top 15, because I think that they would just kind of chuck him right up there. And I'm kind of thinking that you could see Erslan versus like Anthony Smith or someone kind of like that. But I do like Ion Cutelaba in this matchup here. I do think there's a very good chance he gets knocked out. But if Ion Cutelaba has any game plan whatsoever, it should be to wrestle. And I think that he has a big advantage in that area of MMA. And now we have Ziam fighting against Matt Frevola. Based off the most recent performance of Ziam, I really hope Matt Frevola is coming into this matchup with the intention of using his wrestling, because that is Matt Frevola's base. That's kind of what got him to the party, and then he just started knocking people out. You know, I guess Terrence McKinney might have given him some of his power. I don't know, because he knocked out Genaro Valdez in a banger of a fight, even though Valdez got knocked out like 6 times, I think, in that fight. Knocked out Otman Azaita. Good win at the time. Hasn't aged well, but it was a good win. And then he knocked out Drew Dober, which is kind of the same thing. A good win at the time, hasn't aged well. And then he did lose to Benoit Saint-Denis, but wasn't looking that bad until it happened. But I think in this fight here, right here, against Ziam, I think Matt Frevola can find success. I think Matt Frevola can use that wrestling that he does have in his back pocket, and I think that's the way to beat Ziam. Ziam's a very interesting fighter because he did lose to Terrence McKinney in his own right, in, I believe, the first round as well by submission, and he took quite a bit of time away. Well, not that much time away, but he come back at a UFC Paris event and looked amazing against Mikhail Figlak. Kind of looked like a new fighter in a way in a short period of time. And then the same thing happened again against Jai Herbert. I thought he looked really good as well. It looked like he had been consistently improving. But then Claudio Puelles was able to take him down and have top control against him. And that's not a good sign when you're taking a wrestler on in the UFC. I think that Matt Frevola can go out there, can look at the fact that Claudio Puelles was actually able to take down Ziam and early into the fight, and can do that his own right. I think that if Matt Frevola goes out there with the intention of only striking with Ziam, I think he could be in trouble. Ziam, although he is a very technical striker, he can be somewhat low volume, even though he can be also very aggressive at the same time. It's kind of, he's not really a combination striker, but he will throw something out there regularly. That is kind of one punch at a time, one kick at a time. Frevola's a little bit more wild, a little bit more hittable on the feet, but I do think that Frevola has the more kind of well-rounded skill set and the option to wrestle, and I like that option to wrestle in this matchup, so I'm going to go with Frevola to get it done. And although he's an underdog on Tapology, I'm kind of shocked by how many people are agreeing with me on the Matt Frevola pick. And now we move up to Morgan Charriere fighting against Gabriel Miranda. I think that you are paying a bit of a tax on Charriere in this matchup, minus 550. Pretty wide, but I do think he does beat Gabriel Miranda here. Gabriel Miranda is a fighter which, although he is now in the UFC 2 fights, I don't know that much about, because in the UFC, he just gets absolutely smoked by Benoit Saint-Denis on short notice, and then he goes out there and he submits Shane Young in under a minute. Incredible, to be honest with you. And then prior to that, he's been fighting for Face the Danger, and if you know anything about Face the Danger, you know that you know. But anyway, that's kind of what happens to old Gabriel Miranda on the regional scene. He has a couple of good wins, but for the most part, not really much going on. He's a grappler, but his striking doesn't look that good. He's taken on Morgan Charriere, who is a striker, and has found a lot of success with his striking in his career. Has a lot of fights, 30 professional fights now, 10 professional losses. A lot of those have come to very good fighters, though, fighting for Cage Warriors. A lot of them have also come to split decisions as well, but a lot of his wins have come to split decisions too. I do just simply think that Morgan Charriere can defend the takedowns of Gabriel Miranda if he doesn't make a dumb mistake like Shane Young did. I think that Morgan Charriere should also be able to be pretty safe in the grappling. I know Charriere can offensively grapple quite well. He has shown decent defensive grappling in the past as well, and he had that very close fight against Cheppy Mariscal, which I believe just over 50% of reporters on MMA decisions think that he won. It's a close one, but I think that Morgan Charriere does beat Miranda. I think he knocks out Miranda. I think this is an opportunity for him to get a big performance, and then maybe they'll give him another pretty big step up in competition, like they did when he fought against Cheppy in his last fight. Now move up to Kevin Dressé fighting against Brian Battle. Kevin Dressé, very unique situation for him because he can obviously represent France, but still have a very much home crowd advantage in Australia and New Zealand by training for CKB. So it's kind of cool for him, but now I'm pretty happy for him. Now he gets to fight in France, and of course he is French. He takes on Brian Battle though, and I think this is a tough matchup for him because Kevin Dressé, although he is a striker, he does have a very good judo background. I believe that is actually kind of how he has won a lot of his fights so far coming into the UFC. But now that he is in the UFC, we've seen a lot more of his striking that has developed quite well since he has started training over here at CKB. I think that Brian Battle can win this one though. Brian Battle, he's going to have the reach advantage, not typically something that Kevin Dressé has had to deal with, is having the shorter reach because he likes to fight from range. And Brian Battle does the same. I think that it's kind of a matchup where you've got two guys with pretty similar styles on the feet, and one of them I think is just going to be a little bit faster and a little bit more powerful than the other, and I do think that that is Brian Battle. He did fight, Kevin Dressé did fight against Kenan Song, and then if you watch Song Kenan versus Ricky Glenn, Song Kenan looked really, really slow, and in hindsight I'm kind of thinking that's not really the best win, and then Kevin Crosby, well, I've labelled it, did the Kiefer Crosby and put both of his hands on the ground while his opponent has his back and just gave him a free submission win. It's kind of crazy, but I think with Brian Battle though, I don't think he's going to make those same mistakes. I think he's a little bit faster than Kevin Dressé and Kevin Dressé's previous opponents, and he's going to be pretty angry as well. Now that's not really much to factor in when making a prediction, but you know, against Angelusa, it was an eye poke. Andalusa, if he didn't act like an idiot after the fact, definitely could have gotten away with the no contest. But in the end, Battle was beating him up, and probably did deserve to win that fight. But it is what it is. I do think that Battle wins. I think he does beat Kevin Doucet by decision. And with that being said, we can now move up to William Gomis fighting against Joannis and Brito. Joannis and Brito, I think this is a good matchup for him. And the odds reflect that. He's minus 270, pretty wide, considering Gomis is pretty decent. But I think that Brito's kind of proven that he can really be a threat to this division in general. Because Joannis and Brito, you just look through his fights, man, so far in his career. A lot of KOs, a lot of dangerous wins. Knocked out didn't knock out Jack Shaw. TKO Jack Shaw due to that weird stoppage in the cut in Brazil. But he beat Jack Shaw nonetheless. Jonathan Pearce was beating him up on the ground with the wrestling, and then Pearce started yapping to him, and Brito just choked him out, which is hilarious. And then aside from that, did just have a couple of very good wins. The way that Brito fights, though, is he's a very aggressive guy. He's very big for 145 pounds. He's going to come forward, and he's going to bomb away. The exact opposite of what William Gomis does. William Gomis is a low volume striker that likes to fight from range. He can offensively grapple, and he can also have pretty good grappling defense, which he did show in his fight against Francis Marshall. But, you know, beating Yanis Gamore, who fought you on very short notice, doesn't really do it for me. I'll be honest, in that body kick, you know, some people think it was a little bit low. It is what it is. I just think it's a bad matchup for Gomis. I think this is a good matchup for Brito. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. Gomis is a low volume guy, fighting from range. Brito is a guy that's going to be bombing forward, throwing power, mixing up to the body, mixing up to the head, and can very much offensively grapple in his own right. We have seen the blueprint to defeat Joannis and Brito because Bill Algeo wrote it. And I just don't know if William Gomis can follow that blueprint. The way that Bill Algeo was able to beat Brito was actually kind of just fighting him at his own game, pressuring Brito, overwhelming him with volume. I don't think that Gomis has that style. I don't think it's a style that he can pull off. I think that Brito is eventually going to land on the chin of Gomis, and I think that he does win by knockout. Now in the co-main event, Nassourdine Imavov fights against Brendan Allen. I'm going with Imavov. I've been wrong about Imavov many times before. I might even be wrong about him again, but I do think that Imavov can defeat Brendan Allen here. Brendan Allen has been on a great run, though. You cannot take that away from him. He's beaten quite a few of his rivals because, if you guys didn't know, him and Krzysztof Jotko did not like each other one bit, and he submitted Jotko in the first round, was able to submit Andre Muniz and Paul Craig, which is two great wins by submission to have. And then he did have a pretty close fight against Chris Curtis, and so did Nassourdine Imavov, even though I think that Imavov was beating Chris Curtis before the clash of heads. But hey, it is what it is. It's a matchup where I think that Brendan Allen is probably going to need to get the fight down to the ground to beat Imavov, and Imavov has shown that he does have very good takedown defense. I've been more and more impressed as time goes on by Imavov's striking, although he can offensively wrestle, and that is how he has won a lot of his fights. I like Imavov striking a lot, and I was quite impressed, actually, with how he was able to defeat Jared Cannonier, because Jared Cannonier was, I guess, just really trying to get back into that title conversation, and Imavov really closed the door on that one with that win, even though, he just won. I do think that Imavov can defeat Brendan Allen here. I think that Allen, he's going to struggle, I think, to get to win 2 rounds out of 3 against a guy like Imavov, who does have very good takedown defense, is very powerful, can land a lot of strikes, and I think that Imavov is just going to win by defending takedowns and getting the striking done. That was not my best breakdown, but the pick is Imavov. Now we can move on to the main event. Renato Moicano fighting against Benoit Saint-Denis. I am going to pick Benoit Saint-Denis in this matchup here. I've been correct on most of Benoit Saint-Denis' fights so far. I did pick Poirier to beat him. I did pick him to beat Frevola. I did pick him to beat Moises, I believe. And I did not pick him to beat Ismail Bonfim, though, unfortunately. But so far, so good for Benoit Saint-Denis fights. I do think that he can get it done against Renato in this matchup here. And it's a tough one, though, because Renato is just a tough guy, and he has proven to be a very tough guy so far throughout his career. And Moicano's looking good. You know, he took that fight against Rafael dos Anjos on very short notice. I almost want to say it was like a few days' notice. And although he did get beaten up really badly in that fight, he really did make his name for himself there. Come back, beat Brad Riddell. Damn. Brad Riddell, man. Choked over. And Jalen Turner. And Jalen Turner hurt him on the feet quite badly. And that's actually quite where I like Benoit in this matchup. Now, although Benoit isn't the most technical striker, and he can get hit a lot, I still do think that his aggression on the feet is going to be able to hurt Renato Moicano quite a bit, because we even saw that Renato Moicano can get hurt by multiple people, and Benoit is good. Benoit is good on the ground. In fact, like, grappling probably is the best part of his game. And another thing as well that you can't take away from Benoit is when he did fight against Dustin Poirier, he looked good in the first round. Now, yes, Poirier was catching him on the feet, but Benoit was going crazy. He was getting takedowns on Poirier over and over again, not something that you really see all that much. And then Benoit did slow down. Now, we did have Staff going into that matchup, and Poirier just kind of did survive an onslaught and then ended up knocking him out. I think that if Benoit goes out there against Renato Moicano, I think he can get the takedowns, and I think he can have success on the feet as well. Now, maybe Renato Moicano can beat Benoit in the same way that Dustin Poirier did, by surviving the onslaught for the first 2 rounds, and then maybe coming back in the last few rounds, because it's going to be a 5-round fight. Benoit Saint-Denis, so far, I mean, what we've seen is he's just a very aggressive guy, and not really many people can be able to kind of keep up that pace that he does put on people, but he did have Staff in that last matchup, and I'm pretty sure losing in that way, he will have made the adjustment by now, and probably maybe either worked on his cardio, or just kind of worked on not being so overly aggressive, and I do think that Benoit Saint-Denis can go out there and defeat Renato Moicano. I am going to pick him to win by finish in the second round. It could be by knockout, it could be by submission, probably more likely by submission, because Renato Moicano, this is a tough guy, and if I'm not mistaken, Moicano has never been knocked out, but he has been submitted. No, he's been KO'd at 145. He's been KO'd 3 times. Once at 155. And twice at 145. Okay, I was nearly there. With that being said, though, I'll see you guys in the next one. That was my first time recording a UFC prediction video in a very long time. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. I'll see you guys in the next one.